Hello, everyone. Welcome to the NTI PodTalk. My name is Dianne Kaler, and I'm the Director of Nutrition Therapy Institute. This PodTalk is our opportunity to have fun conversations with interesting people who have interesting things to say about nutrition, food, and health. I talk to NTI instructors, students and grads, to health industry professionals, to farmers, and anyone else who has an interest in nutritional wellness. While many of our listeners come from within the NTI community as students and grads, we also have prospective students who tune in. And to those listeners in particular, I hope you find that the people we talk to inspire you to finally make the jump to pursue your passion and come to school here at NTI. So without further ado, let's get on with the show. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of the NTI PodTalk. My name is Dianne Kaler, and I'm the Director of Nutrition Therapy Institute. We have a very special guest here today that I'm very excited about, Dr. Stephen Hussey. I met Dr. Hussey at the recent Weston A. Price Foundation conference, and I was highly impressed by the talk that he gave. I purchased his book and have been reading it voraciously ever since, and it is really a wonderful book. So thank you, Dr. Hussey, for being here. I appreciate you taking time out of your day to spend a few moments with us and answer some of my questions. So welcome.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you. So let's just start off by saying that you are a chiropractor and not a medical doctor, and certainly not a cardiologist, yet you have written a book about the heart and heart disease called Understanding the Heart: Surprising Insights into the Evolutionary Origins of Heart Disease and Why It Matters. So I'll hold that up for our viewers. Here's your book. So you've written this book on heart disease. What kind of gives you, what made you want to put yourself out there as an authority on heart disease as a chiropractor and not a cardiologist?
Well, a lot of reasons. When I was a kid, I had a lot of inflammatory conditions. As a child, I had irritable bowel, I had asthma and allergies. I used to break out in chronic hives all over my body, and ultimately ended up with autoimmune type 1 diabetes, diagnosed when I was 9 years old. And so that kind of, threw my parents and I into this world of Western medicine, relying on them to, manage these conditions. And so it wasn't until college that I started figuring out that the way I lived my life and my lifestyle had a direct impact on how well I could manage these conditions. And, I've since gotten rid of all of them aside from the type 1 diabetes. That is that collateral damage from the inflammation I had as a child. And so, I found it curious that no doctor ever told me that you could manage these things or get rid of them completely by doing that and make diabetes way easier to manage, changing diet and lifestyle and things. And so I started getting really interested in health and how to live a healthy lifestyle. I went and, eventually got a medical education as a chiropractor, and I have a master's in nutrition and functional medicine, and still found that, despite the good education that those things were, I didn't have all the answers that I was personally seeking. Mm-hmm. And so I kept looking and kept looking. And so it was always this, always looking for answers. And so, being type 1 diabetic heavily predisposes me to heart disease for various reasons. No matter how hard I tried, my blood sugars are going to be different or not as good as others who are not type 1 diabetic. And so I started looking into heart disease, trying to, prevent it. Mm-hmm. And, I found a lot of interesting things, a lot of things that were very contrary to what I was taught in my education and what is taught in medical schools, misconceptions about the heart and what causes heart disease. And so I had all this information, and I started sharing it on social media at some point, and people seemed to like it. So I eventually compiled it into, I'd already written one book called The Health Evolution. And so then I had this information about the heart, and I kind of compiled it together and put it together and wrote a book. And that came out in April. So yeah.
Yeah, April 22. So so that's awesome. And for one of the things that I always resonate with is anyone that I hear, or anytime that I hear a medical practitioner, whatever discipline they are trained in and are talking about, whenever I hear someone who focuses on nutrition and they talk about nutrition, but not from the sort of, typical food pyramid type perspective, fat is bad, saturated fat is even worse, and cholesterol is going to kill you, that kind of concept. Whenever I hear someone in the medical profession talking about nutrition, I always make a beeline to listen to what they have to say and see if it is in alignment with what my understanding, after almost 20 years in the field of nutrition and nutrient density, to see if it is in alignment with what my understanding is. And that is what was encouraging about your talk and what drew me to you. But but before I ask my question that I'm trying to get to, I want to say that one of the things that I really appreciate about your book is that you write from a very historical perspective. You talk about evolutionary history, medical history, and your personal history. I think every chapter, starts out with a recount of your own travels, worldwide travels and experiences that you had, and you're relating those experiences to what you now understand about health and wellness. And but just can you talk about do you have a special affinity to understanding current things through the lens of history? I mean, that's how I like to think about things. They say, if you don't know where you came from, you don't know where you are or where you're going to go. And so I really appreciate how you make a concerted effort to include all of that historical information. Did you have a particular drive to do that, or is that just how you are?
Well, I think that it's very, very important to have not just information about health, but a health philosophy. And I think that's missing in I hear a lot of other, influencers or health experts talk about different opinions about health. And lots of times I feel like it's very rooted in, say, quote unquote, science. Or research. And that's fine. That's one resource to get information to decide what we should do about our health. But lots of times I feel like there's a lack of a health philosophy. So I've heard, as an example, I've heard people say that there's absolutely no evidence that polyunsaturated fat or vegetable oils are bad for you. There's no research on it. There's a lot of associations and things like that, but that's very low quality research. And they say there's no evidence for that. And I would argue that person's lacking a health philosophy, because if they're completely reliant on what the literature says and they're only going to do or not do something based on what the literature says, then you're missing out on the fact that those oils have only been around for about 100 years or so. And so if we look at, what happened when those are introduced into society, into the food supply, and how health has declined. I'm not saying that's the only reason why, but that's a food that does not occur in nature, that humans or any living thing have never eaten until about 100 years ago. And now we're eating them in very large quantities as far as the general population. So having that philosophy of where did we come from, evolutionarily, how did we get to where we are, is very important for me in how I make decisions about what this research says, what this opinion is, and what I'm going to do, what I'm going to wake up every day and do for my health. I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that, because that health philosophy needs to be informed by a wide variety of pieces of information, including historical, views. So I really like that. So, you introduce this concept of fats, and, you're talking about seed oils and polyunsaturated fats, but of course, your work focuses on animal fats and saturated fats and really prioritizes those. And so can you talk a little bit more about maybe not necessarily the downsides of the seed oils, but the upsides of the animal fats and the saturated fats for particularly cardiovascular health?
Yeah, for sure. First, just to start off, the reason that, things like margarine or vegetable oils are touted as being heart healthy, the polyunsaturated fats are touted as being heart healthy, is because they do, influence the cholesterol to be lower. So the idea that they're heart healthy is solely based on the idea that cholesterol causes heart disease. Mm-hmm. But if that idea that cholesterol causes heart disease is flawed, which it is, then those foods preventing heart disease doesn't stack up. It doesn't make sense, right? Mm-hmm. And so, the idea that saturated fat and cholesterol are driving heart disease is a big myth, and it was started in the 1950s when some very poorly done research. Well, at this time, heart disease was growing in the United States, and President Eisenhower had a heart attack very famously while he was in office. And
in Denver, he was golfing here in Denver.
yeah. And so that was all over the news, and people were scared about heart disease. And so scientists started looking for an answer. And this one scientist named Ansel Keys gave everybody an answer. And the answer was based on some very poorly done research. It was well done epidemiology, but epidemiology is the lowest form of research that you can do. You can't draw conclusions from that type of research. And so he did his research, and he basically showed that the more saturated fat and cholesterol that a country ate, the more heart disease rates they had. But that's an association. You can't draw conclusions from that. All you can do is say, okay, that's interesting that those are happening at the same time. Let's test that clinically in a clinical trial and see if that's actually the case. And that was never done. And so by the time they did actually test that in clinical trials, the idea had already taken off, and there was lots of money behind it, fueled by the sugar industry and the grain industry. They wanted that theory to go because they wanted people eating their products rather than the saturated fat and animal products. So they put a lot of money into that and funded a lot of scientists and things like that. And so when you actually look at it, though, when you look at the fact that when you look at how, saturated fat is essential for the human body, when we look at plants versus animals, which humans are an animal, plants use phytosterol, which is plant fat, and animals use cholesterol. Mm-hmm. And cholesterol is essential for many, many things. It's there for, vitamin production. It's there for communication between cells. It makes all our hormones. It's transports energy around the body. It does so many different things, and it's essential for life. And saturated fat and animal foods are where we kind of get those. But your liver also makes your cholesterol, and that's where most of it comes from, is your liver making cholesterol. What you eat dietarily has a little bit of an effect, but not as much of an effect as telling your liver to do something different. And so incredibly important to have those things around, to be eating those things, in my opinion. And so if we look at this idea that, first of all, I can kind of pick at science a little bit here and say that the idea that one molecule in the body or one type of molecule in the body is the driver of a whole complex chronic disease, it makes no sense whatsoever. It's very short-sighted, I'd say. Mm-hmm. And we're a very complex biological ecosystem, and to blame a disease on any particular, symptom or any particular metabolite or anything like that just makes no sense. And the only people that theory benefits is the pharmaceutical companies who happen to have a drug that can lower cholesterol. And so that idea has been driven by those companies so that they can continue to sell more and more of those drugs. And there's evidence that in the committees where they decide what cholesterol levels should be, that the pharmaceutical companies are heavily influencing those committees by funding them and doing that kind of thing, because the lower the recommendation is, the more drugs can be prescribed. And if you look at, it's pain medications and it's statin drugs. Those are the top two as far as what's recommended or what's prescribed in the United States, at least every year.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if this is actually true, and I don't have anything to verify it, but there's this sort of saying that jokingly someone thought that cholesterol lowering medication should be put in the water. Like it's so important that the American population reduce their cholesterol that we should just put cholesterol lowering meds in the water. And my understanding is that actually was something that a pharmaceutical company supported and said, yes, we should do that. And they wanted to do that. I mean, it is.
Of course they would. It'd make them a lot of money.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So, you're absolutely right. It only benefits one thing, and that is the pharmaceutical industry. So,
yeah. And there's a study I talk about in my book that shows that our approach to heart disease, which is lowering cholesterol, the use of statin drugs is not working. When you look at the evidence, it is just not working. Heart disease continues to rise. It's not fixing the problem because it's not the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And then in the meantime, people who are on statins are at higher risk for dementia, higher risk for diabetes, et cetera. Yeah.
Yeah. It turns out you need cholesterol for things.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Lower testosterone levels in men,
Yeah.
So, rather than placing the full weight of blame for heart disease on cholesterol and saturated fat, you talk about and delve into very deeply and very thoroughly 3 imbalances that create an environment that, an environment in the body that causes someone to be at higher risk for heart attack. So you talk about these imbalances are not having metabolic flexibility, having too much oxidative stress that depletes nitric oxide, and loss of autonomic balance. And those 3 imbalances that you talk about are so much in alignment with everything that we teach here at NTI. Can you briefly talk about those things? I don't expect you to go into a full lecture, but briefly talk about the metabolic flexibility, the oxidative stress, and the loss of autonomic balance.
Yeah. Yes, these are kind of the 3 pillars I think that are driving heart disease, but pretty much all disease, I think.
Right.
So poor metabolic health. So this is just, does your body take the food that you eat and metabolize it in a way that doesn't harm you? That's kind of how I put it. And so it's maintaining metabolic flexibility. So I define health as the ability of the body to adapt in many different ways. And one of those ways is to adapt to different fuel sources. And unfortunately, in today's world, we've gotten so used to eating processed carbohydrates with every meal that your body's going to burn those first. It's always going to burn those carbs first, unless there's alcohol, it's going to do that first. But it's going to burn those carbs first, and it almost forgets how to burn or make burn fatty acids and make ketones. And so that's called metabolic inflexibility. Some would call that insulin resistance. Or it can lead to insulin resistance. And so, eating in a way that makes us metabolically flexible means a higher fat diet, keeping your body trained to burn fatty acids and ketones, which the heart prefers. Just as a side note, heart prefers those fuels. And so you can test for that using the trig to HDL ratio or a fasting insulin level, different things. Make sure your body's metabolically healthy. It's not running off of glucose all the time. And then there's inflammation and oxidative stress. I kind of lump them together, even though they're different things. Oxidative stress is when we have too many of what are called free radicals in the body. And I call them the Looney Tunes Tasmanian devil, where they're going around like crazy, looking for a paired electron that they don't have. And they're going to steal that electron from anywhere and cause damage in the process. And sources of free radicals can be a poor metabolism, like we just talked about, burning too much glucose for fuel. But also lots of different things, the liver making low antioxidants, being exposed to toxins in our environment, being very stressed out, that kind of stuff. And all those things can cause that inflammation. There's different plant toxins that can cause that inflammation. There's heavy metals, there's all kinds of stuff that we're exposed to on a daily basis that can create this inflammation and oxidative stress. And that not only damages the lining of the arteries and prevents nitric oxide production, it also binds up nitric oxide, which is really important for cardiovascular health. And then The third one is probably the least talked about, which is balance in the autonomic nervous system. And so this is the system in our body that's measuring our environment through our senses and telling your body, is this a safe or threatening environment? It's a safe environment. You can do things like digest or sleep or procreate or detoxify or whatever. And then if your body's getting a stress signal, like this is a stressful environment, it shuts down those things and you get into this fight or flight mode where you have to either run from that or that threat, or you can fight it off or whatever. And it's not like we're always in those life-threatening situations, but we seem to be the only species within the modern world that can incorrectly convince ourselves that our physiology, that we're in that state. We're the only species that can think our way into a stress response, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Those big brains have done a lot of good for us, but they've also done some things that aren't so great within the context of the modern world. And so creating balance in the autonomic nervous system is calming that sympathetic signal and increasing that parasympathetic signal, that rest and digest signal, so we have balance. Because people think, oh, I'm in sympathetic or I'm in parasympathetic, but that's not the case. You're always getting signals from both, and they're always trying to balance each other out. If we get a surge of stressful activity, a sympathetic signal, we always get a lesser surge of parasympathetic. It's always balancing it out. And if we inhibit that non-stress signal, and we get this constant sympathetic or stress signal all the time, it can lead to poor vagal tone. It can an imbalance in the autonomic nervous system that makes us very susceptible to an acute stress. And so that's the ability to adapt. Are we able to adapt to a stress, handle it, and come back to normal? And that's what the autonomic or balance in the autonomic nervous system would allow us to do. And the best way to measure that is heart rate variability. And so yeah, those are the three balances that are driving most chronic disease these days, especially heart disease.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. One thing that you said when you were talking about metabolic flexibility, you said the way you can measure that is, did you say doing a trig to HDL ratio? That's triglyceride to HDL ratio. Is that what you said? Yeah. Yeah. That's what I thought I heard, but I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Love that. Like I said, completely in alignment with everything we talk about here throughout our program in terms of these things being underlying factors, not only for cardiovascular disease, but, really all chronic disease. So we know that there are these primary top myths about heart disease. Saturated fat and cholesterol are bad. Seed oils are good. Are there any kind of what other myths are out there that are top of mind for you about cardiovascular disease?
Well, I'll just, I guess, rattle a few off.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a ton of them.
One is that heart attacks are always caused by a blockage of an artery. One is that a stenosis or narrowing of an artery restricts blood flow. Like I said, technically it does, but it may not cause an issue. Another one is that the heart is the main mover of the blood in the body, which it's not. Yeah, those are three.
Yeah. The heart not being the main mover in the body is, I think, one of the most challenging concepts to get. I've been hearing about this and trying to learn about it for a long time, and it is a little bit of a struggle, but partly because you have to understand mechanics and physics. If you think about a pump and what a pump does and the physics of an actual pump, it gets a little far away from me, but it does definitely make sense that the heart is not the main pump of the blood. So, all right, good. So on a personal note, what two foods or two food components do you always avoid? You would eat, like you would starve before you would eat them.
The seed oils for sure.
Yeah, right.
And grains.
Yeah.
So it's any grain, wheat, barley, rye, oats, whatever.
Yeah.
I don't think those two foods are meant for human consumption. There are better ways to eat grains than others, but they're still grains. yeah, I don't think those foods serve me at all. The only
Mhm.
way they may serve me is if the food I was eating with those in them tastes good and for 30 seconds,
Right.
and that was it. And other than that, everything else is a downside. It's a negative.
Yeah.
And so when I'm thinking about how I want to live my life and what I want, I will definitely sacrifice that 30 seconds of pleasure of eating that food because I want long-term health.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'm very much in alignment with you on the seed oils. I completely 100 and have 110% vigilance about not consuming seed oils. I do consume grains occasionally, but certainly not as a mainstay in the diet. But so right in alignment with you there. What about two foods or ingredients that you rely on daily for optimal health? I'm gonna see if you
Um,
match mine.
Eggs.
Yeah.
I really like eggs. Very, very nutrient dense, and some sort of red meat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and then another food that I rely on less than daily, but frequently is beef liver.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, but
Yeah.
those the
Yeah.
nutrient density there is the important thing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I'm right with you on those. I definitely try to get organ meats in every day in small quantities.
Mhm.
But yeah, I definitely don't meat 7 days a week, but certainly at least five.
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
get organ meats. Yeah.
yeah, and what's important is not just the nutrient density, but the bioavailability
Yes.
of these nutrients, because you can get, kale's pretty nutrient dense, but the
Mm-hmm.
bioavailability is terrible. You're not going to
Mm-hmm.
absorb very much of what's in that. And so we need to eat foods that we are very good at extracting nutrients from. And
Mm-hmm.
animal foods are those foods. And that's why we should center our diet around animal foods and create variety with plant foods.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, very good. So this has been a fun conversation. We don't have really extensive lecture length, long conversations on our podcast, but
Mhm.
um, is there anything that I missed? Anything that you want to get out there that I didn't ask about?
Um, Maybe just, a message or two.
Yeah.
I mean, one is, I mean, we kind of already mentioned it when we were talking about research a little bit. And research is a human developed process, and it's not always going to be free of error. It's never free of error, really. And so we can't base all of our ideas or all of our information on that. We have to take
Mm-hmm.
that as part of the part of the story, but not the whole story. And
Mm-hmm.
then lastly, talking about nutrition specifically, one of my friends, Brian Sanders, said this to me. Where I heard him say this, he didn't say it to me, but he said that the diet that heals you may not be the diet that's right for you the rest of your life. And so
Hmm.
I think that that's very important, because I see people, especially when these diet fads come through, and that they eat this diet and it heals them and it really helps them. And then even if it stops working for them so much, they dogmatically stick to it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not helpful. We should
Mm-hmm.
always have the wisdom to listen to our bodies and say, okay, this diet did a lot of good for me, but maybe long term it's not the best. Let's change it up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And your needs as you get different experiences and you grow and everything may become different as well. And so we should always keep that in mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. One thing that we teach always here at NTI is that, um, you know, biochemical individuality is a real thing. Everybody has unique needs, but those needs also change on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis, and nothing is set in stone, and you don't have to be dogmatic about your diet. So yeah, absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, so what services do you offer? What's your practice like? Where are you located? And then where can people find you?
Yeah. So I mean, in clinic, I do a very neuromusculoskeletal type chiropractic practice.
Mm-hmm.
I do a little bit of nutrition counseling. but I do most of my nutrition counseling online as like a health consult. And so I do that for people all over the world. And so yeah, that's on my website at resourceyourhealth.com. People can find that consulting there. My blog is on there. My books are on there. My books are on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and just any kind of bookseller. And then people can find me at the website, or they can find me on social media. My handle is just Dr. Stephen Hussey, Dr. Stephen Hussey. People can reach out to me there, and yeah.
Great. Good. So resourceyourhealth.com, that's your website. Okay. Just to clarify. Yeah. All right. Awesome. Well, and we are a nutrition training school. So if you're ever looking for someone to help you expand your nutrition services and counseling that you offer, we hope that you reach out to us, because our graduates are definitely skilled, well prepared, highly competent. So I'll just put a plug in for our graduates from NTI.
Yeah, no,
if you're ever
like
looking to expand.
That's
yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. All right. Good. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Hussey. It's been really a pleasure to talk to you. I've enjoyed it. And once again, your book, Understanding the Heart: Surprising Insights into the Evolutionary Origins of Heart Disease and Why It Matters. A fabulous book. And I keep telling my husband and my son, who is 23 years old, you need to read this book, because it's not only about heart disease, it's about really just general health and wellness. So it's awesome. So thanks.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Hi there, and thanks for listening today. If what you heard today inspires you to want to pursue an education in holistic nutrition here at Nutrition Therapy Institute, please check us out on our website, ntischool.com, and reach out to us at admissions@ntischool.com. Our in-depth, comprehensive education is sure to provide you with the knowledge and skills you need to create the work of your dreams. Do something that feeds your passion, aligns with your values, and fuels your drive for a vital and meaningful life. It will be rewarding for yourself, your family, and anyone else with whom you interact. And with that, see you on the next episode.